Good morning, everyone. My name is Jesus Pentel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor in the City of Austin Economic Development Department's Cultural Arts Division. We are doing our Elevate Review Panel for individuals and creative businesses. This is day 6. We have 10 panels for individuals and creative businesses, as well as 9 for nonprofits in the Thrive and the Elevate programs. With me is Jen Margulie. She is our outside equity facilitator, making sure that both city staff as well as the review panelists are keeping equity in mind as they are scoring and reviewing the applications. The panelists have reviewed all of the applications prior to today and have made tentative scores and comments. They can change their scores today depending on the feedback they get from their fellow panelists, but they are not required to do so. The panelists are not working on consensus, so they may have different takes, which is fine. We have also asked them not to repeat anything that has been stated previously by another panelist. So if someone is quiet or is not making a comment, it just means they're in agreement with the comments that have already been provided by their fellow panelists. We will be recording the application. There's a maximum of 10 minutes per each application being reviewed. We'll give a countdown with 2 minutes if we get that far. Most applications have been reviewed in about 5 minutes or so. If there are any technical difficulties, we will pause the timer so that way each application gets the full 10 minutes that it is allocated. We have asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that they can, and have asked them to provide feedback for future improvement as well as constructive criticism. So with that being said, let me get my timer ready. The timer will begin when the primary reviewer starts giving their comments. And our first application up for review is Santir. Jennifer and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Jennifer, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you, Jesus. Yes, Santir is as requesting funding for a concert series to promote Armenian musical heritage. And in my review of this application, I noted that it was a solid presentation of the applicant's longstanding talent within the folk music culture, where I thought that's where the application was strongest in those descriptions throughout the intersectionality and key constituency sections of the application. What I wanted to see more of, I think, was jumping through my comments here, a more, I think, layered response in terms of, it doesn't address intersectional identities, but I think a more layered response would have been more appropriate. And more detail also in the proposed activity description that would help understand how the budget was going to meet those, how Elevate funding was going to meet those activities, and that they would in turn serve key constituencies. Ultimately, I think, again, it was a strong portrait of the applicant's role in this particular art form, but would like to have seen it be tighter in the identification of key constituencies that are considered marginalized or in danger of erasure.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
Sure. My notes were the proposed activities were clearly defined. They showcasing Armenian music and its heritage. You included additional elements such as the workshops and social events. Some suggestions for improvement were equity centering, be more explicit about how equity is centered in your activities. For instance, describe how you can ensure diverse representation among performers, and how you can engage various community members in the planning process, as well as community involvement. Maybe explain a little bit more about how the key constituencies are involved in developing activities. Let's see, what are some other comments? Overall, it says the application was good, with a clear commitment to cultural enrichment and community engagement. By providing additional specifics and clarifying some details, you can further strengthen your case and demonstrate a little bit more deeper alignment with some of the funding priorities.
Anita, did you have more? Sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, just on the budget, just clarifying some of the expenses, ensuring that the expenses align with the proposed activities and they're clearly explained. For instance, breaking down what's included under the production fees and how that supports some of the accessibility that they expressed.
Thank you. Thank you both. Are there other comments from other reviewers? As Jesus mentioned, the goal is not to come to consensus, and folks are coming from different perspectives. So anything that you saw when you were reviewing this application that you haven't yet heard anyone talk about would be great to bring into this conversation now, both for applicants to hear and also your colleagues on the panel. So Jess or Melanie, if there's anything you'd like to share. Okay.
Seeing as there
Thank you
are no
both.
further comments, yes, thank you. Any thoughts that haven't been captured by somebody else? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and then raise your hand to let me know when you have done so. Jess? Jennifer? Anita? And Melanie, do you need a bit more time, or have you finalized your score? Percent here.
Mine's finalized.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. We will move on to our next application then. Our next application up for review is the empty space. Jess and Jennifer are our primary and secondary. And Jess, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. My notes on the empty space, they are co-founded by two queer women of color and are an alternative studio in Austin, Texas, which serves a diverse community of people interested in flow arts and rope education. They were founded in 2021 and have been serving the greater Austin area and Central Texas area for the last 3 years with in-person classes, workshops, and exhibits. They have yoga, body movement classes, as well as sex education, self-improvement workshops, but they primarily focus on teaching rope art known as shibari, or Japanese rope bondage. Studio is considered a safe place for folks of all marginalized communities, and a significant number of their patrons are queer and or people of color. They accept all walks of life, ages ranging from 18 to over 70 years old, and residents of Austin who have lived their whole lives or have just moved in a few months ago. They offer a wide variety of classes, and they are seeking funding for 10 classes a month, ranging from beginner rope practice to advanced shibari. They also want to host 2 open lab times a month for people to practice their craft with a trained supervisor. I enjoyed this application. I thought it was a unique perspective, especially with something as unique as Shibari. I hadn't really heard of that before. I did score above average on most things. I would have liked to have seen more clarity on accessibility, specifically language accessibility, and also marketing. I felt like there wasn't enough marketing that they explored or at least put in detail in their application. And I felt it was a chance to reach other marginalized community members who might be interested in the program. I think that's all the notes I have right now.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer?
Yes, I commented that this application reflects a lot of integrity for providing a safe space within this particular art form for all different kinds of bodies, in addition to the key constituency that were named. And you know, I don't want to duplicate any comments, so I think I will add that I one of the things that I wanted to see was more. It's like I could feel the as I mentioned, the integrity, and I could feel the how I got a general sense of how this lined up with the Elevate priorities. But when I looked at that cultural activities response, I think more detail would have been really helpful. Um, just not depending on the reviewer to assume based on previous responses what was going on with this proposed activity would have been helpful for me, as with some of the other responses, such as the marketing and accessibility.
Thank you both. Other folks, other perspectives on this, it might be different than what we've already heard, things that you saw that you haven't heard us describe yet.
There are no additional comments, differing viewpoints, a note that you have that hasn't been stated already. Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Jess? Jennifer? Melanie? And while Anita's finalizing her score, just for the applicants that may be watching now or in the recording, the 10-minute time for each application, finalizing the scores doesn't count towards that. That's just a time to review the application. So the timing is stopped. This application is done being reviewed. We're just asking the panelists to finalize their scores. They may or may not change their scores depending on the feedback they heard from their fellow panelists. Okay, and Anita, thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Austin Angolan Kizomba Cultural Heritage Project. Anita and Jess are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
So this was, this project is regarding the Black and Angolian communities facing gentrification in East Austin. The mission is to celebrate and promote the Angolan Kizomba, I may have said that wrong, through dance, classes, workshops, performances, and cultural heritage festivals. I did enjoy reviewing this application because I did see the relevance for East Austin and some of the African American communities that are displaced, as well as leaving East Austin. So this was a very, very interesting, yet I think enlightening project, trying to preserve the heritage of the dance forms rooted in the Angolan culture, featuring a lot of BIPOC artists. Some of my comments regarding the proposal, let's see, okay, go back here. Sorry, I've got notes in two different places, my apologies. So overall, the application was very robust and I thought well prepared by refining some of the areas. Obviously, they could strengthen a little bit more and demonstrate a deeper commitment for the community impact. But they had a clear budget, a lot of specific allocations in certain areas. Their outreach strategies seem to be very well defined in underserved areas, engaging underserved audiences as well. Let's see. Some suggestions, maybe a little bit more clarifying of coordination, explaining how these services are coordinated and communicated to participants in advance, as well as describing ongoing feedback mechanisms for accessibility services to ensure continuous improvement. Some other strengths, let's see. Very comprehensive account of their service history, including a lot of examples, really impactful examples they gave about their services, demonstrating strong community engagement and accessing opportunities for key constituents. Some suggestions also, where possible, maybe quantify the impact of what they're doing. For example, providing a little data on how many participants have benefited from the job creation or the career development, as well as highlighting long-term effects, such as anecdotes or case studies, something showing long-term benefits, and even success stories of individuals who may have been impacted by what they're doing. But overall, it was a really, really good application.
Thank you. Secondary, Jess?
I enjoyed this application. I thought it was very well-rounded, very detailed, and I thought that it had a lot of great content in every chapter. So this scored really high for me, and I had a hard time trying to find a critique or something that I would improve. Overall, I felt it was just really well-rounded, good application and good project.
Thank you, Anita and Jess. Melanie or Jennifer, anything that you saw that you'd like to elaborate on? Again, we do not ask reviewers to come to consensus, but we do know that everybody has different perspectives and experiences you bring, and so then we can all benefit from hearing what those are.
I do
I know.
not. Sorry.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Melanie. I did note the chronology and the goals of the service history were really clearly indicated. There was an ample listing of the opportunity creation activities so that you could, clearly see how they were going to set out to meet priorities, provide access to participants. Yeah, definitely was able to get a grasp on what the impact would be for their proposed activity.
Thank you so much. Melanie, what were you going to add? Oh, sorry, I caught you at just the wrong time.
Oh, nothing. I had nothing.
Okay. All right. Anything else that folks want to make sure gets into the conversation?
If there are no further comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita? Jennifer? Jess? And Melanie. Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is biological exuberance. Anita has a conflict of interest with this application, so we'll turn her camera off and have her microphone muted while this application is being discussed. We will invite her back once the panel has finalized their scores on this application. Our primary and secondary are Melanie and Jennifer. And Melanie, whenever you are ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted, so the 10-minute timer will start when you're when you're unmuted and the comments are being provided.
Hi. Biological Exuberance is a film project that seeks to help the LGBTQ communities by showing different interactions in nature between animals that also support that community. So this project seeks to unite LGBT along with science in a way that is very uplifting and meaningful for that community, because it shows the happening of different identities in that realm in nature through animals and not just humans. I saw a lot of history of service and strength in the community, the founders being from immigrant families, and some of their past film projects that really have also served to highlight different communities at risk of cultural erasure, kind of more on a global level, not just in Austin. One thing I would like to see more, I guess, in the key constituents is just a little bit more background on the founders and the key constituents they're serving. I did see that in some of the other areas, though, as far as like cultural leadership, like where it wasn't possibly being written like in the first part of the key constituents. I did see it being shown in other sections instead. Let's see here. But yeah, there's a lot of history of them using film to really highlight underserved communities that I really loved. And this project is, unique and very different than any of the other projects we were looking at. But I really tried to think about how bringing in the sciences and in this kind of way can really help validify and bring integrity to communities that are often marginalized and kind of seen with a lot of judgment. So those are the strengths I saw in this project. The budgeting and everything looked really good as well. I'd like to see, let's see here. On the, Yeah, I guess just a little bit more on the backgrounds of the founders being in the key constituents section would be my main feedback on that. And that's all.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to secondary, just minor point of clarification that panelists are not comparing one application to another. They may, make comments just to kind of make sure an application stands out, but they are scoring each application based on how it meets the review criteria, not in comparison to other applications. Secondary, Jennifer?
Yes, I noted that the application was successful in reflecting a unique perspective on the role of film as a catalyst for paradigm shifts. What I would have liked to see is I really gleaned a lot from the philosophy behind this, the proposed activity. I think maybe in some of the responses, particularly, I think I'll go back through, but particularly key constituencies and let me look, leadership. It was leadership, history of service, and intersectionality may have been a little too heavy toward the gist, the philosophy behind as this connection with film. And I would like to have understood the details a little bit, the logistical details better. I think if it could have leaned a little toward the technical a bit more, that would have provided a helpful balance. Because I did enjoy the uniqueness of this entry into equity and inclusion, this tie between nature and humanity.
Thank you both. I just, one clarification I want to provide and one clarification I want to ask for. The clarification I want to provide is just that according to the applicants, they do say that the film project is intended to uplift LGBTQ plus communities. So I just wanted to name the key constituency that they had named in that regard. And then Jennifer, I was wondering if you could offer us a little more detail on what you mean when you say you'd like to see more about like the technical pieces of what they're doing in the activity itself.
Yes, I'm going to go back up to I think it's question 4. My response was, indicates that the response indicates that the proposed event will be freely accessible and take place in a locally owned Austin venue, and that individuals from key constituencies will participate as panelists. These align with the Elevate guidelines, but the activity is otherwise vaguely described, and the response does not clearly explain how the event will center equity. And I want to look back over. My screen is really squished, but I want to look at their response to number 4.
Sure, and then Jess, while Jennifer's doing that, did you have anything that you would like to add in? We've got about just under 2.5 minutes left for this application. No? Okay.
I did also really like, is it okay to add one more thing myself?
Absolutely.
I also liked their plan in working with the different community centers for their events. For example, La Peña and different places that I feel really do a lot of outreach to marginalized communities. So I really loved like the bringing in of the different venues like that to help with the outreach.
Thanks for bringing that up.
It's helpful to hear Melanie's reflections and to look back at the description of the proposed activity. Yeah, I mean, I think at a second look, I can appreciate um, where I might have looked more closely for logistical details, like step by step, how it would have played out. Um, I think though, for me, I will say I think the alignment between the steps and the budget was a little lost. Does
Mhm.
that help, Jen?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking a look. And just for the public, this is part of, why we have the review panel and the opportunity for panelists to speak to one another and share perspectives about what they've seen and haven't seen. So thank you so much, y'all, for diving into that. And I think we're probably at time. Yes, Jesus? Oh, you're muted.
About 20 seconds left if there are any additional comments. Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jess? Jennifer? And Melanie. All right. And Anita may come back now since we have finished reviewing this application. All right. And our next application up for a review will be Amplifying Urban Echo, Empowering Voices of Austin's Unhoused Community. Melanie and Jess are our primary and secondary. And Melanie, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. Let me get on here. This Amplifying Urban Echo, Empowering Voices of Austin's Unhoused Community. They are a group that is working with different unhoused community centers to in different mutual aid groups and urban leagues, different things like that, to bring artistic and media exposure for the Austin's unhoused community. They provide artistic shows and different arts programs, mentorships, and shows that serve the key constituents between Austin's unhoused and communities of color. Also mental health, a lot of intersectionality in their key constituents, which I really love to see. They provide artistic paid opportunities as well as mentorships to these communities, and are wanting to do more projects that will amplify the voices of these communities, which I think is really great because a lot of times, we have a very large population of unhoused community members, and a lot of times their voices are not seen and or heard, as well as, a lot of times people that are unhoused are, treated as second-class citizens, not to mention the intersectionality of other parts of their identity possibly interplaying with that. The budget looks really great. I saw a lot of history of service where they've worked with different cultural centers that serve communities at risk of cultural erasure and other marginalization. They have a lot of impact and good feedback from the community of showing work like this over the years. The founder themselves comes from a history of housing insecurity. So it comes from a very, deep place of integrity and kind of like working from the ground up in a true way that is really building foundations and communities with lots of different groups to bring this type of awareness and opportunity to the Austin's unhoused communities and other communities at risk of cultural erasure through the unhoused communities. I really, really love this and really think that they showed clear budgeting, marketing, and history of service, intersectionality, all of it. And yeah, that was a great application.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Jess?
This application scored very high for me. I thought it was well-rounded. It was detailed. I particularly liked that they collaborated with a lot of community partners and nonprofits in the area, and that this was giving a pretty big voice to the unhoused with a lot of intersectionality in between that. There wasn't anything actually that I didn't like about this application. It was very thorough, very detailed, very concise, and clearly will make a good impact within the community.
Thank you both. Jennifer, Anita, other thoughts, anything you haven't heard mentioned? And again, everyone has reviewed all the applications, but we did ask folks not to repeat if they have the same comments as the folks who went before. But anything that you haven't heard mentioned yet that you'd like to be part of this conversation?
I'd like to say that I enjoyed this application as well. It seems like it would be very good for the community. So,
Thank you. Just a second, Melanie. Jennifer Price, did you have anything else to add? And then we'll come back to you, Melanie.
Nothing else to add except just applaud. I scored high on this one as well, particularly on the because of the issue of the intersection, how intersectionality was represented through this kind of like primary identity of the unhoused community. That was a really, really strong application overall.
Great, thank you. Melanie, what were you thinking?
Oh, yes. Just wanted to add that I really liked the enhanced accessibility features they had offering to help get people to these events. And I also like their advisory board. The advisory committees are kind of going over a lot of different communities that are directly impacted with this work. That's all.
Thank you for adding those. All right, anything else?
Any additional comments? Anita, did you have any comments or thoughts on this application?
oh, I'm so sorry. Didn't realize my camera went off. My apologies.
Yeah, no, I was just like, wait a minute, has she gone? Yes, I think you did provide
Yes,
some
yeah,
commentary
she
on
did.
here. So, okay, just wanted to make sure. Any final thoughts, comments, anything that hasn't been stated yet about this application? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Nita, Jess, Jennifer, and Melanie. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Danny Tantrum. Jennifer and Melanie are our primary and secondary. And Jennifer, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. So the applicant is, I'm sorry, I'm scooching down. seeking funding for the International Punk Convergence. The event would invite the participants to witness the as described hardcore subculture of punk. The focus is on the grassroots aspect of punk, and it's open to the public. It would be a weekend long event. And again, I think trying to revive attention for the importance of the underground music scene that is punk, which again, which I feel is a really unique entry into connecting with marginalized communities. So I applaud that about the application. I noticed, or what I noted in summary, and I'll be glad to unpack any of the individual responses as well. But what I noted overall is that the application is earnest in the effort to propose a cultural activity that would simultaneously support the trans and queer communities and revitalize enthusiasm for the punk scene. What I would have liked to have seen more of is a consistent focus throughout the application on these constituencies. And again, I can be more specific when I look back through, but what I meant there, I think, is that where it opened strongly with the focus, I was a little lost, I think, in the middle, that was, I think the language shifts from the key constituencies to all people are welcome. And in terms of the guidelines for the funding, I wonder if, there could have been a tighter consistency throughout on the trans and queer communities. And that might be, I want to admit, like a little bit too nitpicky in terms of grantsmanship. But let me see. I do think specific examples would have been helpful, and I'm going to scroll back up to be more concrete. Okay, so where there was in the intersectionality response, for instance, I thought the definitions of intersectionality were somewhat abstract, and I think what I note when I see that is have those identities actually been, I guess, evaluated for need, or for how the services, the applicant services actually do, I guess, provide opportunities for them. The descriptions were basic and don't clearly indicate that the applicant has identified which specific intersectional identities are served by their creative practice. So while it's there, the acknowledgement, I think, unpacking it a bit more would have been helpful. That was one example where I would have liked to see more specificity. And then in terms of the activity, I thought the description was sufficient. Furthermore, the intended audiences were identified, and this is, I think, where the slippage happens for me. The intended audiences are identified as those all over the globe, which is more of a generalization. And it's not that I don't believe in the integrity of the applicant, but the focus vacillates for me, and that's where I got a little bit confused. But overall, again, I want to reiterate, I'm really fascinated by the focus on this genre of music as as the door that would open for outreach to these communities.
Great, thank you. Melanie, secondary?
Hello. Yes, I agreed with I feel that that these events and the mission is definitely serving communities that have experienced institutional marginalization. I would also like to see a little bit more clarity on the key constituents there, because then in the history of service, there is a past of service within communities that are also at risk of cultural erasure. And so I think one suggestion would be on how the intersectionality of that fits in, and how the applicant is reaching out to these different communities to bring them in, since it is in their history of service. So I think that they could add a little bit more detail on that. The applicant's creative leadership is rooted in lived experience with key constituency groups that have other forms of marginalization. I was feeling a lot on the intersectionality. I feel like this is a definite event that can really bring together a lot of different groups through punk music and these different communities that are marginalized. And yes, I'd like to just see a little more detail on that, but it is definitely in the history. Let's see. There is accessibility in the form of ASL interpretation at the events, which is also in the budget. And also language accessibility. There is some plans for that. So that's all good. Is this? Yep. I think that that's all I have for that one.
Thank you both. And I know we have fewer than 2 minutes left on this. I just want to offer a quick clarification. I know that Jennifer mentioned grantsmanship, and that was one of the instructions that Jesus offers to reviewers, is to, reviewers are asked to score based on what is in the application, not necessarily how well it is expressed or how, easy it is to read. And so if Melanie mentioned that there are, for example, intersectionality, you could see some evidence of intersectionality in other questions, responses to other questions, maybe more than in the intersectionality question. And I just want to offer reviewers a reminder that you can certainly take into account whatever you've learned about an applicant from the entirety of the application. It doesn't have to be kind of question for question, even when you're scoring for that question. Anita and Jess, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I wanted to add that I really enjoyed seeing punk representation, but for me, where the application kind of fell short was it was just overall too vague and didn't provide enough detail in each section for what I needed for clarity of the application.
Thank you. Anita?
Yeah, I also enjoyed the application.
And we are at time. Thank you. Let me stop my timer there. So if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jess, Anita, Jennifer. And Melanie. And we will pause the recording. Back up. And we are back from break. Our next application up for review is the Love of China's Lunar New Year Festival. Jess and Jennifer are our primary and secondary. And Jess, whenever you're ready to begin. And we have 10 minutes to review the applications. The timer will start whenever the primary starts giving their commentary.
Let me get my notes here. The Love of China's mission is to serve Austin's Chinese American community as an organization of maintaining cultural heritage through public dance performances and interactive school shows. They introduce Chinese culture to the local community, and the overarching goal for their application is to instill pride of Chinese American heritage and to cultivate appreciation and practice of Chinese culture, performing arts through dance. Their key constituencies are largely children of immigrants, second-generation Chinese American children, Chinese adoptees, and children of mixed race. They're also interested in teaching Chinese culture to locals and children at public and private schools in the Austin area. They're seeking funding to plan and organize the hosting of a Lunar New Year festival in collaboration with other Austin-based Asian American organizations and to be held at the Asian American Resource Center. I really enjoyed reviewing this application. I thought it had a good idea. I think where it fell short for me or could have shown more improvement was the accessibility, both language accessibility and physical accessibility. The proposal did not offer any specialized programming or accommodations for individuals with disabilities, and I felt that was a missed opportunity. I do understand that language accessibility would be English and Mandarin, Chinese, but I felt that it would have been a little bit more well-rounded to include other languages, such as Spanish. But overall, I thought it was a good application and it scored well.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer.
Yeah. Overall summary was that stronger reconciliation between the narrative and the budget would have been advantageous, as would additional details about the involvement or and or representation of the key constituencies in terms of the planning, the leadership, and the intersectionality responses. But overall, I also really enjoyed this application for its, I thought that overall it demonstrated a really long-standing commitment to keeping this this organization's activities rooted in the community, representative of the key constituencies, but also very, it strongly prioritizes inviting everyone in. It's almost like the representation happens through the support for the constituencies happens through this recognition that is invited from the larger community. So I really appreciated that. I think their mission comes through really strongly all the way through the application. Let me see, there was something I noted. To be more specific. I think, in terms of their intersectionality response, it focuses more on the practice of inclusion, from which we could infer, I think, how they identify their intersectional identities. It indirectly addresses, it's more of an indirect address of intersectionality. They indicate plans to remove economic barriers to access, which I thought was really positive, for the activities, to avail those to activities in the facility that represents the key constituencies. And I did have, I think, some, I would have liked to have seen actually the activity description be more specific. It's adequately detailed. I think it addresses all the points of the question, directly states that equity will be centered through a focus on accessibility, and that one of the desired outcomes is celebration among the Asian American participants. The manner in which key constituencies will be involved in the development of these activities is not fully clear. That's where I kind of fell short for me. But again, overall, I think I really had no problem being able to see the strength of this mission, and that it was tied to, I really liked the explanation of the evolution of the service history, how it kind of grew out of a demand for services that were that the students, the learners' needs were identified, evaluated, and then responded to. I thought that was really effective, and an important thing to include in the application.
Thank you both. Other things that you haven't heard mentioned yet that you'd like to bring into this conversation? Anita, I'll start with you. Eleni, anything from you? Thank you. And just for folks who are maybe just now tuning in after the break, all the reviewers have reviewed each application, and we welcome their feedback and perspectives, but we also do ask them not to repeat if they just have the same sorts of feedback to offer.
Thank you for that, Jen. If there are no further comments from the panel, thoughts that you have that haven't been stated already? If there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita, Jess, Melanie, and Jennifer. Thank you. Next application up for review is On Your Mark. Anita and Jess are our primary and secondary, and Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
So this was an individual artist with more than 30 years experience. And the interesting, I guess, thing about the application was I had a hard time trying to understand what what the proposed activities were. There was a lot of information about their history, their background, and it seems like this artist has done a lot of great things in the community. However, it was a little unclear for me anyway on, like I said, what the proposed activities would be, as well as how it connected with the cultural funding that we're doing. The budget was not very clear. It was there wasn't any detail about what the funding would be for and how it would be used. So I was a little it took me a little bit to try to understand again what they were trying to articulate. Overall, I guess it says the application was, it showed that they definitely have a strong commitment to their art and really trying to engage the public with their art, but a little bit more clarity and detail in answering the questions so that we can understand what they're looking to do with the funding, would help strengthen the application and better help us to be able to see how it aligns with the funding goals of the city.
Thank you. Secondary, Jess?
I wanted to reiterate that I did find the application too general and too vague in general. A lot of my notes on the application were that it needed more detail, that it was a bit confusing to understand the direction the application was trying to go and what goals they were trying to achieve. And I think that was just throughout the application. So for me, I found this submission confusing and needing a lot of clarity.
Thank you both. Melanie or Jennifer, any comments that you had on this in your review that we haven't yet brought out in the discussion?
I would just say, you know, as a in support of this application, that given the length of the applicants' history of service in the community, that there's a great opportunity to expand here. I think it's certainly you know, the potential is there, and that you know, it's maybe deserving of some agency, this application to pull out more detail, more even more of the history, and to show the, you know, the connections between the objectives and the people who would benefit. So it just, yeah, I would, I guess to the subtext here is, you know, I think there's a great potential going forward.
I'd also like to add that specifically some feedback on the budget. In reviewing the budget, it only has one line item for the entire amount. And so I think breaking down that and just showing us where exactly those funding will be allocated would have given us a little bit more context to where they were trying to achieve goals. But if it's all lumped into one category, it was kind of hard for me, at least, to understand the objective there.
Thank you. It's a great coaching point. Melanie, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. Anyone else who's already spoken but had some other thoughts? Anything before we close this one out?
If there are no further thoughts or comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jess, Jennifer, and Anita and Melanie, thank you. Next application up for review is Michael Anthony Garcia, Melanie and Anita are our primary and secondary, and Melanie, whenever you're ready to begin.
Is that the Marco Antonio?
No, this is Michael Anthony Garcia.
Oh, 1 second.
Sure. So as Melanie's pulling up the application, panelists have, there are 26 applications that are being reviewed today. So staff has done a cursory review, but is following along with the panelists' comments just to make sure the comments are for the correct application, that we do have the correct application pulled up. So it is Michael Anthony Garcia.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. And the timer will start whenever Melanie starts giving her commentary.
Hi, Michael Anthony Garcia is representing the Latinx, BIPOC, and queer communities through his work in the Austin artist community. And they are wanting to have funding for magazines, art curated projects that highlight the artists in the key constituencies. There's a lot of history of service as an educator in different schools of marginalized communities and communities at risk of cultural erasure, a past with magazines and art exhibits that show service to these communities as well as coming from these communities. The cultural leadership as well is primarily the founder, but is also seeks input from the leadership in all of the communities and schools where they are working. I think I would have liked to see more on that particular cultural leadership, a little bit more details on that. The cultural activities are very well laid out. There is a lot of opportunities for artists in these communities through this event. Let me see here. Good intersectionality. There is accessibility and language accessibility in the budget. There's a lot of details in the marketing about different communities with disabilities and other things like that that are getting reached out to be included in these exhibits and in the crowd. So there was a couple of things I had to look in other categories to get the information I needed, but I did find them there. The budget is laid out well. There's a lot of good representation for accessibility, very specific accessibility features, and Yes, the one feedback I would have is just a little bit more in the sections about, you know, how you're reaching out to the different schools, like in your history, like how they'll be included as well, ongoing to be coming to the current events. And that's the main feedback I have, but I think it's a great proposal.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
Sure. So I definitely agree with some of the information that Melanie just provided. I would say that there was a lot of proposed activities, so I was a little concerned about implementation and whether or not if you know if based off the fact that there was one person that would they be able to accomplish a lot of the goals that they were setting out. So I guess I would have liked to see a little bit more refined activities so that would help, at least for me, to help me understand better, have you been able to do this before? And that would give me a better idea about whether or not I feel like you could do it in the future. At least that was just it was just a lot. It was a lot of information, a lot of proposed activities, a lot of different sections to impact. So I guess I would just like to see it a little bit more refined. I think that would have helped me a little bit better. But overall, like I said, good proposal. The budget was very, very detailed. That's where I really did like all of the detail in the budget, and that was very well done with that.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you.
I will say before we move on to any additional comments from other panelists, the time period for the activities to be accomplished here is a year and 3 months. We are moving to a calendar year, but currently activities occur between October 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2025. So they will have a year and a quarter to complete all of the activities. With that being said, are there additional comments from other panelists? So just shaking her head. Jennifer, did you have any additional comments? Anything that has not been covered already? No? Or Melanie or Anita, anything else you'd like to add? If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita, Jennifer, and Jess, and Melanie. Thank you, everyone. All right, the next application up for review is Alejandra Almuelle. Melanie and Jennifer are our primary and secondary. And Melanie, whenever you're ready to begin.
Just pulling this up. Sure. Am I turning on? Okay. Hello. So Alejandra has a really fun project idea. Let's see here. She is representing the community of immigrants from South America, Latinx, and ceramics artists. Her belief is that, and what is, a fact, is that the arts like ceramics sometimes are subcategorized more in the like handicraft and not given as much recognition as other forms of visual art. So her work has been to really highlight that and bring it into the forefront, as well as networking with the community of ceramic artists in the Latin community to help create a sense of community within that, because it's also like a very isolatory art form. And so her work in her history of service and in the community has done a lot to help bring those voices together and form a sense of community and solidarity in a community that is at risk of cultural erasure, and that is oftentimes a lot more isolatory as far as the individual artists go. Let's see, the cultural leadership is deeply rooted. The cultural activities that they are promoting or proposing, excuse me, to do is a ceramic sculpture exhibition that works with different artists as well as videographers and graphic designers, photographers, installers that all represent the communities of the key constituents. There's a lot of effort in the marketing to bring in these different communities. One thing I would have liked to see is more on the accessibility, because unfortunately, just having the federally mandated ADA accessibility features at the venue isn't able to be counted. So they are putting that in the proposal, but we would need to see some more accessibility features to improve that score. But otherwise, I love all the other detail in all the other categories. They're working a lot with like the Texas School for the Deaf, Spanish speaking communities, and different things as far as marketing goes, to try to be very inclusive on the marketing, which I really like. And the budget is well-rounded. I think that the intersectionality really represents the artists and the communities that are coming to see. I love as well that there's outreach to children's communities with disabilities to be included in this program and in viewing it as well. That's all right now that I have to say.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer?
I really this application resonated with me as my being a visual artist myself, and what I really got from it was a strong functions really strongly in terms of artist statement, particularly I mean, right off the top, going into how ceramics is a marginalized form of art. I think that's really interesting and can be operationalized and put into play as programming. I didn't make the connections as easily between the uplifting of the ceramics and being on a par or parallel with how it would uplift the communities. Not that it wouldn't, but I didn't get a clear sense. It's, to me, the overall impact that this application had on me, other than being a really, as I said, a really fascinating statement on the artist's focus, was that the address of the community, the identification of the key constituencies, for me, consistently felt latent. So in other words, I really got that the art form was prioritized. I wanted to get more strongly that the constituencies were identified as marginalized in an integral way, and that the outcome for them was the primary focus. That's where I thought it could have been tighter, and it's so, there's so much that I do grasp. I wonder if that had been kind of that attention had been channeled into the constituencies. I think I would have had an easier time making the connection. So that's where the balance was off for me.
Thank you so much, both of you. Anita, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'd just like to piggyback on what Jennifer was saying. I found the same issues as I was scoring, exactly the way she was expressing. It was difficult to make the jump.
Thank you. Jess, what about you? Thank you all. Oh, Melody, did you have?
There was one thing I forgot to add, and it was just that in the accessibility feature, it turned out that they do have budgeted in for ASL interpretation and services like that, but they had it under language accessibility. So I would just suggest to the person, I was able to give the points because I found it, but you would just want to move the ASL interpretation into the accessibility area of the proposal. That's all.
We have about a minute and a half left. We do have optional application workshops, not mandatory, and we have advised our applicants that ASL is considered a non-English language, since it is a language and non-English. So good point for feedback, but just clarification for you on that. And with the minute and 15 seconds left, we do advise the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that they can. And so that was basically Melanie's point, is that even if an answer is in a different area, if they can find the response, you will still get the points for that. But just for clarity, both for the applicant and for the panelists, we do advise that ASL interpreters would be more language accessibility, since American Sign Language is its own unique language. 48 seconds left. Any additional comments from the panel? Thoughts you have that haven't been stated by others already? If there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jennifer, Anita, Jess, and Melanie. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is the Queen Fantasia Wood. Jennifer and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Jennifer, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, the Queen Fantasia Wood has a creative mission of elevating the voices of queer, BIPOC, and underrepresented gender identities through high-level performance art, including song, dance, and artistic storytelling, often in a musical format. the application does reiterate that the key constituencies include the BIPOC community, especially those of African and Native American descent. The applicant's events serve constituencies by adding to artists' local and social media reach. So this is an opportunity created by providing highly coveted and paying bookings and centering their stories in unique productions. I thought that this was a strong application in terms of the voice here is in terms of its advocacy consistent throughout and in unity throughout, very clearly to me, throughout this application, in unity with the key constituencies. I'm going to switch over to my comments. What I landed on was the application demonstrates that the applicant has a strong focus on cultivating marginalized talent in the performance field and a firm commitment to developing their creative practice to accommodate an increase in constituencies that would benefit from it. I think I've noted where it fell short was in terms of supporting evidence for the who the key constituencies. I think maybe stretching that into other responses, but it's been really helpful for me today to particularly Jen's clarification about finding that information in other, throughout the responses on the application. So I would pull up on some of my grantsmanship comments on this application, because I want to go back to the was one. Yeah, I want to probably lessen the focus on grantsmanship, I think, and pivot more toward where the voice in this application does demonstrate lived experience in common with the key constituencies. I think that comes through very strongly throughout in the intersectionality responses, intersectionality response, and in the I want to say it was also the leadership response. I added my note for the description of the cultural activity was that it can be discerned from the applicant's responses that the proposed activity would depend heavily on the key constituencies' direct involvement. The response speaks more to the long-range vision of the applicant's creative practice without effectively describing how the Queen's Playhouse, which is the proposed event, would benefit those constituencies. So I think I was looking for more information about outcomes because they are certainly alluded to in that earlier response on the key constituencies question. It focuses on the need for logistical improve. The description of the proposed activity focuses on the need for logistical improvements and increased profit, neither of which clearly describe what the desired outcome is for the key constituencies or what their specific roles would be in developing the activities. So while I have no questions about integrity in terms of representation and lived experience and those connections, I think there was an opportunity missed, particularly in the cultural activities response, to round out this picture of impact on the communities.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
Where I saw some very strong points that she raised were in the intersectionality piece. I thought she was very, very clear and very detailed about her history and how her history and would truly impact the work that she's proposing. So I did find this application quite refreshing. Just from an artistic point of view, I just felt like there was just a lot that this particular artist is going to be able to to share with the community. Where I think that there could be some improvement was a little bit more detailed on the proposed activities. I think a little bit more clarification on what that looks like, and I don't know that I was looking at what people would gain from it. I guess I just automatically assumed, based off of her history and the way she described some of the activities and some of the work that she's already done. At least for me, I found all of the answers that I thought that she was trying to, to portray. The budget was really good. She was very detailed in the budget, and to the point of even describing the type of people that she would include as artists. So I did find this application quite refreshing, and scored it high.
Thank you both. I do just want to mention that the applicant does use they, them, their pronouns according to the application. So let's just make sure that as we're talking about their application, we use those. And thanks both for the detail in your responses. Anything else, Jess or Melanie, that you saw that Jennifer or Anita haven't brought up yet?
I don't have anything to add, but I did want to reiterate that I also concur with the secondary and primaries thoughts regarding the cultural activities response. It did provide too little detail and not enough insight into how it would benefit the communities, and I think that was significant in this application.
Thank you. Melanie, anything to add that hasn't been addressed so far?
Thank you, everyone. If there are no additional comments, thoughts you have that haven't been covered already. If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jess, Anita, and Melanie and Jennifer, thank you. Our next application up for review is Musical Connections. Jess and Jennifer are our primary and secondary. And Jess, whenever you are ready to begin.
Thank you. Musical Connections is a nonprofit corporation. They are organized to promote a greater understanding of music of the world through performances, cultural exchanges, music history, and heritage, and by educating the public about a multitude of music produced by cultures around the world. They are submitting an application for their Masters Music Concert Series, a project that consists of 10 concerts featuring ethnic and classical music of Eastern European countries, where artists represent both the classical and folk music of their homelands, while sharing history, language, culture, and traditions. I really liked the idea of this application and initiative. I thought that the first couple of responses were very strong, especially history of service, but where this application needed more insight and more detail, I felt was the cultural activities and how that relates to benefiting their constituents. intersectionality and inclusion, and then also accessibility, both physical accessibility and language accessibility. I think those categories needed more insight and affected my overall scoring of this application.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer?
I was I thought the application was like a testament to a very strong individual artists presence and influence on the musical community in Austin. I thought that there were a lot of commendable and notable accolades here that uh, described here that certainly have and have translated into programming, you know, for a long time, and could translate well into programming for key constituencies. But I also thought that there was not a clear connection made between, you know, like this kind of pretty intricate description of the history of the applicant's career and accomplishments, and how, you know, a given marginalized community would you know, progress, or what opportunities would present themselves. The connection there overall for me wasn't clear.
Thank you both. Any other comments, divergent thoughts, things that you haven't heard mentioned yet? Yeah, Melanie.
I did notice that a lot of the accessibility features, like they don't budget any in. However, they're saying that the venue they're working with provides this extensive list of accessibility features beyond the federally mandated ones. And so I found that information in another category, and I found them budgeting it under the venue rental instead of accessibility features. So that's one thing I noticed in the proposal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And that's a good example of something that, again, if you find it that it's present, you score it as if it's present, but it's a good coaching piece to mention to applicants in the future for this application or other applications, so that it's easier for reviewers to find your information. Anyone else have anything to add? Other thoughts?
Any differing opinions? Any thoughts you have that haven't been covered already? Melanie?
Oh, sorry. One other thing is that I think their status got changed after they sent in the application. So they'll need to, it doesn't subtract points on the budget, but they'll have to revamp the budget to reflect the ICB instead of the nonprofit.
Yes, noted. We're reviewing individuals and creative businesses, but they did indicate they were a nonprofit organization. So we will look into that, and just for the budget, you know, keep that in mind, that if it is a smaller amount for the budget, while there is no matching requirement, if they do have anything that's over the request amount, they can discuss that. Preferably in the far right column, column C, but even if it is in that middle column, you know, that's okay. Again, one of the points of looking beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. About 4 minutes left on this application. Any additional comments? Anything, thoughts that you have that haven't been stated already? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jess, Anita, Jennifer, and Melanie. All right, thank you, everyone. We will pause the recording. Welcome back from lunch. We are continuing our Elevate review panel for individuals and creative businesses, day 6. I am Jesus Pantel, the Cultural Funding Supervisor in the City of Boston Economic Development Department, Cultural Arts Division. We have Jen Margulies here as our outside equity facilitator, making sure that both city staff as well as the review panelists keep equity top of mind when reviewing these applications. The panelists have reviewed all of the applications prior to today and have tentatively scored them and made comments on them. They may change their scores today depending on the feedback from their fellow panelists, but they are not required to do so. The panelists are not scoring by consensus. It's okay if they have different takes. We have asked the panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists. So if they don't have any additional comments or, are not giving any commentary, that's because they are in agreement with what has been stated previously by other panelists. We have a 10-minute maximum time limit for each application. I will be keeping track of that. If we have any kind of technical difficulties or anything like that, we will pause the timer so that way each application gets the full 10 minutes that it is allotted. We have asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that they can, but they still have to score each application based on the information that is provided therein. If they're familiar with your work, they can utilize that. Or if they went to your website or any kind of a social media, they can utilize that information when they're scoring the applications. I think that is it. So we will begin reviewing applications. Our next application up for review is Austin Action Fest and Market. Anita and Jess are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, awesome. So the Austin Action Fest says their core mission is to provide a diverse place for filmmakers and audiences. A very interesting project, lots of film, but it also looks like they're going to be doing some kind of firsthand productions, which sound very interesting. Let's see. As far as the application itself, let's see what we said here. Okay, so the key constituents it said included filmmakers from marginalized communities, which focused on action filmmakers and stunt people. Let's see. Their proposed activities were a range of activities for about 4 days, I believe. It was very well thought out, very well explained on the types of activities they were looking to produce. They had a pretty good marketing plan as well. Their budget was very detailed. Lots of detail in there. I definitely would have liked to see a little bit more money going to artists, just because we definitely want to promote that. There was a lot of money going towards marketing and venue rental, and a little less going to artists. And I'd love to see that flipped because I think we definitely want to encourage building artists in the community. But overall, it was a very good application. It seems like they've got a history of doing this work. Lots of community partners, as well as lots of people that they've already engaged, and it seems like this will be a very interesting series of events. So I scored it fairly high.
Thank you. Secondary, Jess?
I really liked the concept of this application. I did feel that it was pretty convoluted and hard to follow in some aspects, and how particularly the details of getting so much done in so little time within the timeline they had given themselves for the cultural activities specifically. I thought the budget was concise, but I do concur with the primary that I would have liked to have seen more compensation gone to the artists. And I felt that accessibility was kind of a second thought, I guess. So I would have liked to have seen more accessibility, not only physical accessibility, but also language accessibility. It sounds like they're creating really great things, and I think it was a missed opportunity not to involve other languages. That's all I have.
Thank you both. And I do just want to state, again, restate for the panelists and state for anyone watching that reviewers have been asked not to score on grantsmanship. So an experience of reading might have been that something was difficult to follow or convoluted, just as you say. But if the information, is ultimately there, then reviewers would take that into account with the score. People would get scored for that. What I'm hearing you say, Jess, is that you could have used more specificity in the cultural activities section to understand how things are going to be accomplished. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Other reviewers, divergent opinions, yeah, a take that you had that you haven't heard yet.
Any additional thoughts or comments from the panel? Seeing as there are none.
Did it just sorry, real quick. I saw that some of you had shaken your head and other people looked like they were still looking at their screens and comments. So I just want to make sure everybody had an opportunity if there was anything to add. We do have a little bit more time for this application, so I don't want to rush anyone.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
I know sometimes you do have to formulate your thoughts. So we do try and give you a little bit of time. So that way, if you are thinking if there is anything that you want to add in, especially if it's divergent or if it's something you have, even if it is in keeping with what other panelists have said, like scoring wise, but if there's any specific comments you have not previously stated. But oh, Jennifer.
I will just and a pause to the I agree with the kind of a bit confusing display explanation of execution and implementation. And I was a bit surprised by the accessibility responses, that they weren't more on par with other responses in terms of what would be offered. However, there's a philosophy in here that's entrepreneurial that runs throughout this application that I think is really important in terms of promoting and retaining local talent. I think there was maybe in the key constituencies response, a really strong statement about why Austin loses talent and why they go elsewhere. And I think it was really well positioned and something to build around maybe in future applications.
Thanks so much. Anything else on this application?
There are no further comments. No other thoughts you have that haven't already been stated? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Anita, Jennifer, Melanie, and Jess. Alrighty, thanks everyone. Next application up for review is Vivo Blues. Melanie and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Melanie, whenever you are ready to begin.
Hello. Vivo Blues is an applicant that is wanting to host a music festival with workshops and mentorship opportunities at Rosewood Park. And as well, it's going to be a recording project where they are grouping together people from marginalized communities and communities that are at risk of cultural erasure to record a song that everyone is participating in called We Are Austin. So I think it's a really cool idea. The key constituencies focus on African American, Latinx, Indigenous, immigrant populations, as well as low income neighborhoods facing gentrification and displacement. One thing I would like to see more of is the history of the applicant, because in the materials provided, I saw a certificate where a person has got an Austin holiday, like the day named after them by the mayor. And so like, I'm assuming that that is due to this person's past work in the community that serves these constituents. But it's not really anywhere in the proposal about the person's history. But the history of service does include, let's see here, creating events that do serve the key constituents. The cultural leadership as well is very much represented by the key constituents. However, they're not really like specific on who these people are. So I would love to see more detail on that. It shows like what groups the cultural leadership stems from, but I don't see any specific information on that. So I'd love to see more on that. Let's see what else. The showcase does focus a lot on the key constituents of inner city youth, the disabled community. It does have a lot in the budget as well to attract tourism. The intersectionality, I feel, really is shown with Latinx and Black communities, as well as special needs, inner city youth, LGBTQ plus community members, ethnic racial minorities, women and gender minorities, and elders. They are including the feedback and participation in all these groups, creating a lot of intersectionality. The accessibility has got a lot of creative offerings, such as audio enhancement, as well as ASL, Braille for visually impaired, digital versions, tactile maps, and also budgeting in volunteer training to assist people with disabilities proactively, not just under request. Language accessibility is good. I'm just looking to see what it was specifically. Again, the ASL interpretation and listening for people with hearing impairments, as well as everything will have Spanish translations. There will be multilingual personnel staffing the booths to help with all translations, and signage will be in English and Spanish as well. The marketing really includes all the different groups that we're wanting to see being represented in the marketing. and the budget reflects everything. I think it's a wonderful idea. Some of my favorite, songs of my lifetime are these types of collaborative recording projects that really represent a certain community. And I would just love to see more on the history of the applicant. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
Hard not to repeat because she was very thorough. But this was this is a very important project. The disability space is not one that you see very often, and so I was definitely happy to hear or to see that this project existed. But like Melanie, I agree that there was not very much about the founding partners and why they created this and what their connection to the disability space was. And of course, I think that connection would help us to be able to tell a better story on why this is important for the community by providing examples of, this is why this is important, because it impacted me in this way, and this is why I started this. So that wasn't there. So of course, you had to take off some points for that because we didn't have that connection. The other piece was with the leadership, just again specifying more that this person provides this type of leadership. I think again, that connection wasn't there as to why these people were the best, folks to put on this event. So having that connection, and why this is important, and who you have on your staff that is possibly disabled or have certain challenges that would make sure that this was a successful event. I also agree that the accessibility piece was very thorough, which was really good to see. This is probably one of the best accessibility descriptions that we've seen. The budget, I think the budget piece, I was a little, there's a lot of money that they have in the production, but less in some of the other areas. So just kind of, I think, maybe looking at that piece more in the future. But other than that, it was a good proposal. But other than the leadership piece and those things, I would say that's it.
Thank you both. And I want to invite Jess or Jennifer. Do you have divergent opinions, different perspective, anything you'd like to mention that we haven't already discussed about this application?
I just wanted to reiterate that my notes on this application concur with the secondary and the primary, in that I felt that the applicant didn't provide clear description for leadership roles. I also put it down for a number of other of the categories, but I did really enjoy the idea, and I did think it had potential. I just didn't see the potential in the details of the application.
Thank you. Jennifer, did you have anything you want to add?
Pretty much concur all around, so nothing different.
Thank you.
If there are no further comments, additional thoughts you have that haven't been covered already, seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Melanie and Jess, Anita, and Jennifer, thank you. Our next application up for review is Sadie Sparks. Melanie and Jess are our primary and secondary. And Melanie, whenever you are ready to begin.
Okay, so Sadie Sparks is a project where they're expanding on a project that they have done in the past with a thing called the Little Free Libraries, which are like little mailbox shaped libraries around town. The applicant serves communities of her main focus is women, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, low income, disabled, and children. And so what they're doing is they are teaching literary workshops in the community at different libraries and spaces in communities that risk cultural erasure. These workshops are free to the public. And what they create out of these workshops is something called love letters, where the writers write general, kind of generic, uplifting letters that readers will be able to access for free all around town because they'll be in these little free libraries. So it's kind of a double-edged effect because you have people benefiting from getting to read these notes of encouragement, but you also have people receiving writing workshops for free in order to create that, which creates a lot of empowerment and confidence in the community. I've seen myself writing workshops really do a lot to change people's lives. And I love that this person is using the opportunity to create something for the public, also being a way to instruct the public in such necessary and awesome workshops. So the history of service, this person has provided workshops in places like the Ann Richards School, which is over 50% communities of color, Texas School for the Blind, Austin Public Library, Flow Imagine, which is Black owned, as well as Sands Bar, Black owned and operated, and Art Spark Texas, which is disability community. The cultural leadership, the majority of the applicants' cultural leadership, the applicant themselves is in other marginalized community category, I would say. And a lot of their advisors and creative leadership roles that they surround themselves with are also coming from advising from a place of risk of cultural erasure. So I put majority on that. The cultural activities, I kind of already explained. The intersectionality really seeks to bring together BIPOC, women, queer, trans, poor, single parents, and the disabled community. A lot of the spaces and venues that the workshops happen at reflect this. There's going to be accessibility features that I thought were pretty cool. Some examples are, if people cannot get to the in-person workshops, there's going to be online versions of all the workshops. There's going to be a PO box to send letters to if the writer cannot attend the workshops in person. There's also going to be options for non-writing people to participate, such as like children or people that are disabled in ways that cause them to not be able to write. They can do more artistic, like pictures and include those in the letters. And there's going to be workshops with therapists and counselors for writing with people, for people with emotional disability. Language accessibility, there is a plan for Braille in the letters, as well as Spanish interpretation provided by professionals. The marketing is using multiple channels of promotion for the key constituents, as well as English as a second language, disabled communities, and tourism boards. The budget is reflective of all of this, and it looks like there's been a lot of positive feedback from the applicants' work in the past, and the impact that they've made in the communities where they've provided these writing workshops, as well as the communities that get to receive the letters. That's all.
Thank you. Secondary, Jess?
Thank you. I really liked this application. I thought that the concept was very fun, for lack of a better word. And I liked the use of literary creativity, and also just being truly accessible. As Melanie mentioned, they had Braille and different languages and accommodations to include everyone in this project, and I thought that that was really well done. I don't have anything that hasn't been said, but overall this scored very high for me, and I thought it was a really great concept.
Thank you both. Any comments, Anita or Jennifer, that you felt differently? Anything you, different perspectives that you had, or anything you haven't heard mentioned that you would like us to bring into the conversation? All right, and just for our afternoon audience who might not have heard us say this in the beginning, all the reviewers have reviewed all the applications, and we've just asked them in this public discussion not to repeat if what you say exactly concurs, that we don't need everyone chiming in to say me too, me too, me too, but everyone has reviewed and provided comments on all the applications.
Thank you, Jen. If there are no further comments, additional thoughts you have that haven't been covered already? If not, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Melanie, Jennifer, Jess, and Anita. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Cerca Vida. Jennifer and Melanie are our primary and secondary. And Jennifer, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thanks, Jesus. Cerca Vida states its creative mission as aiding in equitable work for artists of color within the circus genre. Cerca Vida invites the audience into a world of duality, exploring the intimacy of human vulnerability with the strength and daring of circus acrobatics and a spectrum of other technical movement disciplines. I'll pause there and just say I was really grateful to learn about this this genre, and am really happy and want to come see it. Was really happy to see it positioned here in the among the other applicants as a a program within the proposed program within this community. They, in terms of their key constituencies, Cerca Vida aims to elevate new voices and perspectives in the field by hiring Latino, Black, Asian, and LGBTQIA individuals, both as performers and in leadership roles. That's one of their proposed ways of creating opportunity, but I guess to be more specific, or they do reiterate that those are the key constituencies named throughout the application. So I think overall, as I said, I was really excited about this application. I thought it was consistently strong throughout, consistently clear. I'm going to go to my I want to go to my summary comment first. Overall, this application successfully demonstrates the applicant's understanding of and intent to uphold the guidelines set forth in the Elevate priorities, as well as their dedication to bringing marginalized circus artists further into the foreground. The data-supported narratives in the proposal show that creative mission and key constituencies are directly aligned, and they confirm the applicant's capacity for sustaining Ventanas beyond the Elevate grant cycle, and Ventanas is the proposed activity. So I was, in other words, really able to see clearly the connection between what they're setting out to do and I think, you know, how they're going to measure the impact. I want to go up maybe to something more specific. I was impressed by the key constituencies response. I think kind of maybe speaks for the whole application. They identify those very effectively. The response brings attention to a unique segment of BIPOC individuals facing intersectional challenges because it provides a thoughtful and layered explanation of the lack of funding support for circus arts and certainly BIPOC circus artists. So I think they really drive home where this really fascinating niche that should come out of niche space and into the foreground. What the, you know, I like that they identified the specific challenges, not just the identities. And I'll take a look down at the, know that, I'm gonna go up to the description. They describe the event very clearly. They center content that is developed by and for key constituency groups, so I didn't have a problem discerning that. And it'll the proposal will serve and be accountable to those communities. Equity is a core part. I was able to, I think, get that very clearly. And I'm sorry, I'm reading the generalized notes. The description of the applicant's proposed activity correlates sufficiently with the attached budget. So there was alignment there and effectively indicates that key constituencies will be involved in the development through multiple roles, from performer to administrator. And as I recall, they do specifically refer to like which identities, the identities of the specific performers, to confirm how the constituencies are involved. Aside from the prioritized groups, the description also accounts for other marginalized constituencies, the hearing impaired and those whose first language is not English. So I really applauded them for expanding their services in that way. They have plans to provide accessibility accommodations for those communities as well. The way that they will center equity is shown in the description of the two bonus programming events, which is these really interesting supplemental events, the Uncle Junior Project, and it's an exhibit, and that's going to piggyback the main event, and there's a free dress rehearsal show that would allow other, I think this was for, I think it was for youth to participate in, I believe. So in other words, creating different avenues, diverse avenues for participation. So I thought they did just an all around really thorough, they kind of didn't leave any stone unturned on this application.
Thank you. Secondary, Melanie?
I couldn't agree more with everything said. I really liked that the constituents, the founders, the actors involved are all being represented in these constituent groups, as well as outreach to the community, access by lower income and at-risk youth to be able to have access to these performances. I feel like Austin is like the live music capital of the world, as well as, in my opinion, performance arts. But a lot of times, that's not everyone's experience, because if you are economically or geographically stifled to be able to make it to these types of performances, you might not get the same exposure and access to these types of things, to where a lot of things like circus arts and these types of acrobatic things that are so amazing for mental health and well-being and diversity are sometimes inaccessible to families of low income. So I really love that all of that's included. That's all.
Thank you both. Other panelists, do you have anything to add to what's been shared so far?
I'd like to add that the budget, I really enjoyed looking at the budget, because I like to see, Melanie talked about, Austin being the live music capital, but I also like to see our artists being paid. And so, this applicant, they weren't afraid to put the money where their mouth is, to actually pay the artists. And so, and I'd love to see that more on some of the other applications, showing that we do value our artists. And we can support them also, with all of the other, but putting your mouth where your money where your mouth is. So I really appreciated this, and this was very well done, and they hit all the key points that we were looking for on the budget, and I thought that was very well done.
Thanks, Anita. Jess, I saw you shaking your head. You feel like everything you noted has already been commented on. Okay.
Just for a bit of clarification, there was a comment kind of comparing this application to others, and just kind of as a demonstration is fine, but panelists have been advised not to compare one application to another when they're scoring, only to score each application based on its individual merit. We have roughly 30 seconds left. My internet went out for probably about 10 or 15 seconds, so I did pause the timer there. Jen, was there anything, this was early on when the primary was speaking, but if there was anything that needs clarification that was stated, just want to open that up since my internet was out for just a few seconds.
Thank you. No, not that I saw.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. If there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jennifer, Melanie, Anita, and Jess, thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is 8-week collage and meditation series with Tina Karagulian, Black Rose Arts and Press. Jess and Jennifer are our primary and secondary, and Jess, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. This is a art music therapy project for ages 35 and up, mostly women, serving Middle Eastern, Asian, and Hispanic, Latino, Indigenous women and communities. They are applying for an 8-week customized collage series, art and meditation for adults to awaken and unstuck their creativity. This also includes the 8-week yoga and sound healing classes and a 2-day-long women's retreat. While reviewing that application, I think the thing that confused me the most, or that I would have liked to have seen more clarity and detail in, was that the language accessibility plan was not clear, but accessibility holds a big bulk of the application's budget. There's some language in the application that says I'm waiting on a quote or I'm figuring out a quote, and so it appeared that it wasn't finalized. And so most of what was left over in the budget just kind of went into that. And so I would have liked to have just seen some confidence and clarity in that kind of aspect of the application. But I really liked the idea of having a women's retreat, especially for marginalized community members, and thought it was a good topic and proposal overall.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer?
I really appreciated as well this idea of a retreat, which I think is you know, important to be able to put that in the hands of you know, a marginalized community who would probably otherwise not be able to or you know, conditions might be such that they would not be able to afford it otherwise. And so that I concur with that as well. Where I was thrown, I think, was in the um, in that initial identification of the key constituencies. I thought there was some vacillation going on there between the you know, the minorities identified, but then also I think something recurring here is ages 35 and up. I kept seeing that throughout, and so I couldn't like definitively pin down who would actually you know, wind up at this retreat. That didn't to me confirm that the marketing would directly target you know, the marginalized constituencies. There was, you know, the discrepancy made me wonder. And I think overall, um, yeah, I was concerned that it didn't effectively position the marginalized and endangered communities at the center of the funding proposal. I think for me, there was a lot of emphasis um, on the activity itself rather than the outcome. Though I did note that the letters of support um, were helpful for you know, affirming the applicant's dedication, long time history providing this kind of service. So I don't question integrity at all. I just couldn't connect the um, um, you know, the implementation part of it, I think, didn't land for me in terms of who would be reached and if those folks would fall within the guidelines of the priorities for Elevate.
Thank you so much. Other folks, perspectives you had that you haven't heard from our primary or secondary? Divergent opinions or anything that you haven't heard mentioned? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. If there are no further comments, differing opinions, thoughts you have that have not been noted by others, I do give you a little bit of time to do this just in case you are formulating some thoughts or if anything does hit you. But if there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jennifer, Anita, Jess, and Melanie. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is the Just Because Art Production Company. Anita and Jess are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
So I'm not sure that well, first of all, I love that that their key constituencies were um, the LGBTQ community, the veterans, and communities with musical and visual artists, creatives, and so forth. So I did really appreciate that that's who they were targeting. And I think that community is very important, especially to the to Austin community, because uh, um, Fort Hood is about 45 minutes away, with veterans, one of the largest military institutions in the U.S., which is one of the reasons why I'm even in Austin. So I love that someone is catering to this community. I think I was a little unclear about um, the proposed activity and exactly what they were proposing. I think there was, or maybe I had to look a little bit for it, for the information in a few different places, because where I thought it wasn't there. So I had to look a little bit further and try to read into some of the language. So it wasn't as clear for me anyway. I think um, I think it's called Undefined by Design, which may be why I didn't understand it. But it's a festival for creatives. But again, that was just my observation. I think it was the accessibility piece was the other piece that I wanted to just kind of share. Um, there's a lot of disabled vets, so I would have liked to seen a little bit more detail in the accessibility piece, in reaching some of those individuals. The budget also, they didn't ask for the maximum amount. They seemed to ask for what they felt like they needed, which I thought was impressive. The budget it looked very sensible, and overall, I think it was a pretty average, at least for me, proposal.
Thank you. Secondary, Jess?
I'll try not to reiterate too much, but I did feel that the cultural activities provided too little detail. And I would have liked to have seen a lot more insight into what that looked like and how that would be accomplished. Another note that I had was here somewhere. I also felt that the proposed activities didn't provide specialized adaptations for non-English speaking communities. It kind of felt like an afterthought for me. But overall, I concur with the sentence that Anita provided.
Thank you, Anita and Jess. Jennifer and Melanie, do you have anything that hasn't already been mentioned that you'd like to bring forward? Places where you might have seen something different in your review or seen something differently? Okay. I see folks were saying no. It doesn't look like
All right.
we had a
you.
lot of divergence on this one.
Great, thanks. I am following along on the application as well as panelists are making comments. Staff has only done a cursory glance at these applications just to determine eligibility. But if there are no, so thank you for that, Jen. If there are no additional comments, thoughts that you haven't voiced already, if not, if you would please finalize your comments or finalize your scores, excuse me, and let me know when you have done so. Jess, Anita, and Jennifer and Melanie, thank you. Our next application up for review is Renowned. Melanie and Anita are our primary and secondary, and Melanie, whenever you're ready to begin.
Hello. Renowned. One second here. Oh, hold on 1 second.
Sure, I'll
So-
restart the timer whenever
Well,
you.
my notes weren't coming up for some reason. Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. Renowned seeks to create a magazine and regular events that serve the communities, including beginning and self-funded creatives, LGBTQIA plus / queer creative and performers, and neurodivergent special needs artists. They seek to do this through multiple magazine issues as well as pop-up events that are on a semi-regular basis throughout the year. They serve a marginalized key constituents. The history of their service as well shows service towards the key constituents through artist workshops, employment, event, and exhibition opportunities within the key constituents. The cultural leadership. The founders of this organization have a strong background in education with neurodivergent and special needs. One thing I would like to see more of is it mentions the names of the applicants and where they're from, but I'm wondering if they are from immigration families. I feel like there might be more there with representing communities that are at risk of cultural erasure through the actual applicants' backgrounds. However, it's not really stated in the actual proposal itself. And I kind of see this a little bit as like sometimes people maybe don't want to, you know, play that card or, you know, speak too much about themselves in that kind of like making a case for themselves out of humility and humbleness. But I would like to see more of their background because it would help me understand kind of where they're coming from as well. But other than that, so that's why a lot of my scoring is in the marginalized communities and not as much in the cultural erasure sections, just because it wasn't totally clear. Accessibility, they're including sign language, closed captioning, braille, audio, and mobility assistance, language accessibility with the ASL and also Spanish. Marketing and budget looks really good as well. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Melanie. Secondary, Anita?
I noted some of the same things with the key constituencies and the cultural leadership, and not really understanding the connection and whether, you know, these folks are, you know, part of that community. I did see that they had a lot of relationships and partnerships with other companies or other organizations that provide some of the services that they're wanting to provide. So I thought, you know, that was very good that they were able to, even though they didn't list it, but they had that connection, you know, to those organizations that are providing those services. So that was, you know, that helped me to understand a little bit better that they knew what they were talking about. The cultural activities, I think, similar to what Melanie said. I don't think I have any other comments that are different.
Great, thank you. And before I open it up, I do just want, you know, to say that the role of the reviewers is, you know, really to assess whether the application demonstrates that it is by, for, and about those key constituencies, so communities that are at risk of cultural erasure, displacement, other marginalized communities. And it's not to, kind of imagine, well, I think maybe from this person's name or where they're from that they may or may not have this life experience. And so it's supports reviewers in really reviewing the application and making those judgments when they have more information. But that's what reviewers are looking for is, understanding more about, is this application by, for, and about the key constituent communities. That said, Jennifer, Jess, is there anything that you saw in this application that we haven't talked about yet that we should bring into this conversation?
For me, I scored this application pretty high. I really liked that they had a focus on underserved creatives, particularly self-funded creatives in the queer community and neurodivergent communities. And I did feel that the application was pretty well-rounded from my point of view.
Thank you. Jennifer, anything to add?
I didn't have anything to add.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We do ask that you not repeat comments that have been already stated, but if you do have additional thoughts, I'd also like to give you a little bit of time just in case. But if there are additional thoughts, comments on this application, if there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Melanie, Jess, Jennifer, and Anita. Thank you, everyone. And we will pause the recording. All right, we are back from break, and our next application up for review is Garden of You podcast. Melanie and Anita are our primary and secondary, and Melanie, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted, Melanie, so the timer will start when you're unmuted and giving your comments.
Thank you very much. Garden of You podcast seeks to serve key constituencies that include Black and Latino groups, single mothers, and trauma survivors who face cultural erasure and displacement. They also engage low-income families and individuals navigating difficult transitions. Their history of service, they show a history of providing workshops on leadership roles, jobs, and career development mentorship, social services by way of free counseling and mentoring to support single mothers and trauma survivors, as well as networking and education events. The applicant shows a background in the key constituency groups as a Black, Latino, and single parent. The advisory board comprises community leaders, faith-based practitioners, and experts in personal development and social services. Their proposed idea is a new podcast called Garden of You. The Garden of You podcast addresses unique challenges faced by Black and Latino groups, single mothers, fathers, teen moms, trauma survivors, fostering personal growth and community connection. The key constituents are involved through feedback and collaboration, shaping the content of the podcast and participating in the workshops. They have a history already with books written and online books as well that cover all of these subjects, and the applicant has been building up a community surrounding their work through this book, workshops, and all this other mentoring and social services I'm mentioning in the past. So from what I'm gathering, the Garden of You podcast is a new project. However, it's based on a lot of foundational work that has been aligned with the same cause in the past. the intersectionality of Black and Latino communities, single mothers and trauma survivors, also diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, people navigating financial difficulties and significant life transitions, which I love because I feel like we're in a culture that, you know, one life transition and you can be out on the streets. If you don't have a nest egg, there's just so many things where even though we are a community here in Austin, you're pretty much like a lot of times on your own if you find yourself in an emergency situation or going through hardship or going through a transition. So I love that they're really trying to focus on, you know, not just the idea of unity, but also the day to day bare bones of like actual steps and tools to help people actually survive and thrive in our community. Um, Accessibility, they are proposing broadcasting accessibility for the visually impaired, as well as remote participation options for the workshops and in person events. Language accessibility, they will be transcribing everything into both English and Spanish. The marketing shows multiple streams to attract the key constituents, to attract people English as a second language, to attract disabled communities and also tourism boards as well as the wider audience that comes with like a podcast because it's being broadcast out as well, which can attract more tourism. The budget is very reflective of everything and very thorough. um, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
Okay, so I also like that they included marginalized communities in Austin, especially Black and Latino groups, single mothers, and trauma survivors. I guess I was trying to understand the artistry in it all and how it would help to promote um, um, more artistry in the community. So I was a little I didn't understand the connection, so I had a hard time with this one. Maybe someone else can help me to, you know, to piece it together, but I was unclear about the artistry piece and so that kind of um, stumped me on all of the, you know, when I was looking at each of the categories. For instance, paying the guests and you know how so if anyone can help me with that, I think I was a little stumped on that.
I will say, if it helps for clarification, that podcasts, we have had a number of different podcast applications, and we do view that as kind of, it's not a perfect analogy, but like a documentary film or something like that. So it's just the medium itself is the art form, and then just depending on what the podcast is about. So, you know, again, staff has only done a cursory review of these applications, so not sure if your comment is about the artistry, you know, relating to other things, or if it's just about podcasts in general. I will say podcasts in general are fine for us to fund. And then I'll open it up if other panelists have comments specifically to what Anita was talking about, or just other comments in general that they would like to provide for this application.
I'm definitely open to some assistance and helping me grade.
Or maybe even if you haven't gone already, but you are in agreement with everybody, if there's, you know, maybe one or two thoughts you have on the application that you could provide. Melanie? Oh, you're muted, but go ahead.
I guess I was seeing the like the self-help aspect of the podcasts and the workshops that are being offered on different, you know, financial and different tools. Um, I guess as the offering in itself. That's probably not that helpful, but that's kind of what I was visioning the activities being about.
Oh yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think maybe to extend what Melanie was saying, my understanding was that the podcast would sort of be could inspire conversation, and that the workshops could like reinforce. But I think for me, and maybe related to what Anita is saying, the connection, I thought there's a lot of information that um, is, I think, descriptive without um, being like quite grounded. And I think sometimes I had trouble determining if these were aspirational activities or if they are already happening. That's where I got lost. And there are kind of, I think, some chunks of things that are positioned throughout, like repeated throughout, and where I was expecting those to kind of unfold into more detail. And again, not to harp on how it's written, but like an example that says, this is, this activity, it happened here, and this was the result of it. But instead, I think it's, for me overall, there's some generalizations, I think, that are problematic, where I think it's deserving of more specificity.
Thank you.
We have
Jess,
just over 30 seconds. Jess, any thoughts that you have on this? No? I will say also, in the less than 30 seconds we have left, in their proposed public activity, they do state for their public activity, the podcast launch event will be held at a rented studio. So basically it'll be a launch party, which is at our optional application workshops. We do encourage, especially for like podcasts and stuff like that, for applicants to have stuff like that. 6 seconds left. Final thoughts? Seeing as how we're out of time, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jess and Melanie, Jennifer, and Anita. All righty, thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Norman Base. Jennifer and Katie are Jennifer is our primary. We had an applicant who had reviewed the applications, and we missed reassigning a secondary to this one. So Jennifer, if you'll give your commentary on this one, and then we'll call on the other panelists if they have any additional insight. But Jennifer, whenever you are ready to begin.
Okay, this applicant, Norman Base, is proposing an event, the Trap Burger Fest. And the description of key constituencies is from this applicant is the Black, Brown, LGBTQ skate community friendly event community, and that the event will be a friendly occasion, bringing everyone together, giving local artists a bigger push than usual. And I'll just pause there and say, I really think that that mission for the activity comes through strongly throughout this application. Overall, I think I would have liked more details to go on. But it's very consistent, the focus. There are some there's a bodega nights activity that the applicant runs regularly. So there is already an audience being addressed. The key constituencies are, he has a consistent relationship with them. And so that, to me says that this the Burger Fest is coming out of growth and an evaluation of need and where communities are intersecting. I really thought that was bringing in the skate community with the LGBTQ and BIPOC communities is really interesting and um, would be a new way to draw in underrepresented voices. Just to look at some of my other comments. I really wanted to be able to score this application much higher because there are some really glowing letters of support that talk about the applicant's history of, for instance, this Bodega Nights program that happens regularly, and also their reaching of, like, I think, immigrant communities as well. So, tapping into other voices. But I could not find enough of that represented in the responses themselves to kind of to make the loop between the implementation of this proposed activity and how the constituents would participate. That language around that is pretty vague. So it reflects that the whole application reflects that he's been a longstanding supporter of communities prioritized by the Elevate guidelines. His role as a musician who practices outreach to those communities is commendable, and future efforts to receive funding are deserving of a more detailed narrative of the applicant's creative practice, as well as the addition of some indication that there's, I don't like to say research, but just I think more details that are reflective of the constituents.
Thank you. I will say that even though the letters of support and the work samples are not scored in and of themselves, they are part of the application and can help answer any application questions. So I'm not sure if that helps with the specificity, but just wanted to point that out, that they don't have a score themselves, but they can help inform how you look at the application as a whole. With that being said, are there comments from other panelists, divergent views, other takes that you have on this one? Melanie, yes.
I'm like, where's my hand? I just noticed that in the actual budget template, there was not descriptions of what the numbers were reflecting. It just had the numbers themselves without descriptions. There were budgets allotments in a lot of different categories, which was good. So we just need like more descriptive, and it also added up to 38,500 instead of 30,000. That's all.
Thank you. And those budget pieces are also part of what reviewers can look at to see, okay, are you paying artists? The comment was made earlier about putting your money where your mouth is. So having some description of, this line item is X, but here's how I'm breaking it down. If all that's going to one person versus if that's going to 5 people, right, that's going to be different, obviously. So that is one of the reasons why reviewers look for that kind of specificity. Other folks, things you thought were strong about this application, things you thought weren't as strong about this application. Sounds like our
Anita.
first two commenters may have addressed. It sounds like Jess or Anita, what you would have said. Okay.
You're reading my mind, Jen. That was basically what I was going to ask. It sounds like y'all are in agreement with what Jennifer has said, but if you do have different thoughts, even similar sentiments, but a different thought that hasn't been noted yet, or if there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jennifer, Melanie, Jess, and Anita. Thank you. All right, our next application up for review is Daisy Bone Artist Development. Jess and Jennifer are our primary and secondary. And Jess, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. This application intends to provide full service artist development, including recording sessions where they offer writing and production services at no upfront cost to the artist. They are also starting a series of weekend-long workshops at Orb Recording Studios called Write, Record, Release, where they mentor aspiring engineers, writers, and producers with hands-on experience, and educational seminars with established music industry executives and artists. For this application, in scoring in general, I found it very difficult to understand how the application reaches the underserved communities and how that is central to the application's mission and goals. I felt that there was a little bit of disconnect and maybe that the constituencies were an afterthought. And it was really hard for me to find that anywhere in the application. I did like the idea and the concept as a musician in the scene. I can definitely see how this would help, but I didn't feel that there was much detail regarding which community members, the intersectionality, and then also just accessibility and how to get the best of this program for the needs of what this grant opportunity is for. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer.
Yeah, my comments won't be too much different. I read this as though the perhaps the point was missed that there is a target in terms of who these marginalized communities, or the definition of a marginalized community, a community in danger of being erased. And we, have discussed here that, suggested guidelines aren't comprehensive, but I don't see either an strong argument being made to define any marginalized community within this application. So I couldn't map the objectives of the Elevate funding to the responses here.
Thank you both. Are there other comments that people have, things that you saw when you were reviewing this that we haven't talked about yet? Strengths that we haven't mentioned, places you thought weren't strong that haven't come up? Okay.
I'm seeing
Thanks,
Anita
Jess and
and
Jennifer.
Melanie shake their heads, so thank you, Jess and Jennifer. If there are no either additional comments from Jess and Jennifer, Anita and Melanie, anything that you have that hasn't been stated already? If there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita, Jess, and everyone else, thank you. Our next application up for review is Nolo. Anita and Jess are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
So this group, this is why Austin is so interesting, because I found this so intriguing and just so creative, honestly. What Nolo is doing is they're a band that supports recovery and mental health of recovering addicts and alcoholics in Austin and surrounding areas. It's a part of the recovery of their constituents, and they talk about how they are part of the community. You know, this is one of the reasons why they started this this particular this community after, you know, experiencing you know, some issues with alcohol and drugs, and so they created this. There's a band. It's a band, and it's really, like I said, focused on helping to rehab members. Let's see. Their key constituency is the recovery community, like I said. They do have some plans for accessibility in talking, but they weren't very descriptive, at least from, I wasn't really clear on some of it. There was a lot of information in there, but I couldn't grasp the pieces on accessibility that they were trying to convey. So I did not see that. So if someone else sees that, I'd love to see, you know, to understand if that was there and I just missed it. They've released a full-length album, or I think they're looking to release their first album in this year. Let's see what else. The budget, the budget was something that I really was concerned about, just because all of their funding, the 27,500 of the 30,000 was on marketing, and there was no money allocated for the payment of artists, which I think is upside down. I think we want to pay our artists, and so you know, I would love to see money, at least half of that, going to the artists, because I think it's important to pay our artists. I think it's important. Plus, marketing is great, but paying artists is a little bit, you know, that's important too. But other than that, it's a great concept. I absolutely love it. I think it benefits the community, and you know, would love to see more.
Excuse me. Thank you. Secondary, Jess?
Yeah, I thought this application had a lot of potential. I really enjoyed that they worked closely with the Sims Foundation and HAM to deliver music therapy to people that are suffering from abuse and addiction. I also really liked that they have the recovery open mic nights called Sober Sessions that are once a month. I think that being able to have that outlet for musicians and addicts has a great intersectionality. Where this application did fall short for me, though, was what was mentioned by the primary regarding the budget. I don't feel that it clearly reflected the application and what was attempting to be achieved through the application. And I also concur that the artists should have had some funding allocated to compensate them for their time and talents. Other than that, I feel like I would have liked to have seen more intentionality in the intersections of musicians and those who are struggling with addiction, and also other marginalized community groups that may fall through the cracks in between those as well. But overall, I did feel it had a lot of potential.
Thank you both. Other comments, things that you saw in this application, either strengths or places where it fell short for you that you have not yet heard discussed? Just as a reminder, panelists are not charged with coming to consensus, but we can benefit from hearing the different perspectives that folks have, and people do have the ability, although are not required, to shift scores as a result of what they hear. And so we do appreciate if there's anything that you see in here that you haven't heard us talking about so far, that you are able to bring that forward.
While you're thinking, if you have any additional comments, I will note for the budget, the comment on the artists, we do list in our guidelines, one of the priorities is payment to artists and administrators. So that could be one of the reasons that comment was made. The other item is that, for the panelists, as you're considering the budget, the minimum is to show how the city award amount would be spent, so the city request amount of $30,000. With that being said, we do have, as I mentioned before, optional application workshops, and we do let applicants know at those, or if they come to our open office hours, or give us a call on the phone, that since there is no matching requirement, if they do have a budget that's larger than the request amount, it's fine to include that, preferably in the far right column, in column C. But also, as I was saying, the minimum is just showing the 30,000. So maybe they did have more of the budget and just didn't include it in here. Again, that's speculation. So you have to go, score based on what is provided in the application. But just wanted to throw that out there for consideration. Just over 3 minutes left on this application. Any final thoughts or comments? Any thoughts you have that have not been stated by others already? Seeing as there are none, Jess, I saw you moving your hand, so I didn't know if you were making a comment. No? Okay. Didn't know if you were trying to unpress that mute button. If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Melanie, Jennifer, Anita, and Jess. Thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Centro Americanto Fest 2025. Melanie and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Melanie, whenever you're ready to begin.
All right. Hello. Centro Americanto Fest is representing the communities of immigrants from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama that are in Austin. These are all groups that risk cultural erasure in Austin. Their history of service is very detailed. They have had this festival and supporting events since 2011. It was actually founded in El Salvador, but it was brought to Austin in 2011. So it's benefited, many businesses, performers, and they have worked with City of Austin cultural programs since 2012. So they have a deep history of service. Cultural leadership. The founder and subsequent positions of power in this organization have been held by people from all of these communities who are at risk of cultural erasure in Austin and are accountable to those communities. The cultural activity that they are proposing is Of course, the Centro Americanto Fest, which is a music festival that's planned by and works with key constituencies, including local vendors and artists from these communities. The film festival portion will seek to bring awareness of the struggles, traditions, and stories of Central American cultures, bridging gaps between Austinites and the Central American communities therein. Intersectionality. Centro Americanto Fest seeks to bring awareness to geographical, cultural, and economic stereotypes and challenges in the Central American community and in Austin. They seek to challenge this image and show the positive gifts that immigration brings to our society. There's also a focus on including youth by bringing artists that appeal to the younger demographic as well and blends Central American and African influences through their art. The ticket price are priced at an accessible level to promote accessibility in different communities with different economic statuses. Accessibility. They're proposing that the the volunteers of Centro Americanto Fest will be taking a training course provided by the ADA to be able to serve patrons with disabilities. They are also proposing alternate ticket buying methods. Language accessibility will be fully bilingual in English and Spanish. Marketing is covering all of the areas, the key constituents, new tourism, new groups, as well as different economic status and key constituency groups. Let's see here. The budget. The budget is reflecting the event very well and is covering all of the points that the city wanted to show. Let me just double check that real quick on the total. Yeah, the total's good. And I also like the breakdown, really good breakdown of details of what all of the budget is going to go into. So I really like this proposal as far as the history of service and the amount of key constituents it's able to reach through the participants and the audience. And would really love to see this event happen. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita? Oh, and you're muted, Anita, so I'll pause the timer just for
No worries. I said, like Melanie, I believe that the event is very well organized. They were very clear about, you know, their plans for the festival. I guess I was a little, I differ from Melanie in that I don't see that this is a group that is, you know, that the city is concerned about erasure. So I didn't agree with that piece. You know, it's heavily, you know, Latino community, and I think this is a great event. I think this definitely provides culture for that event, but for the people of the Latino community. However, I just don't believe that it is a marginalized group in the sense that from what I've seen, and that's just my thoughts. But I think it's a very, you know, worthwhile event. I would love to attend, but that's just my thoughts. Great, but very well done.
All right. Thank you both. And I did just want to offer before we open up for comments that Black and Latino communities in different ways in Austin are both identified as at risk of cultural erasure and displacement. as gentrification has been making its way through Austin, and there are some materials about that we can access on some of the public guidelines. So if that helps provide some clarity around those priority key constituencies. With that said, are there other comments that folks had, divergent opinions from what you've heard already, things that you saw in this review that we haven't, in this application that we haven't talked about yet in this review?
If there are no further comments, I saw Jess shaking her head, but do want to give everybody a chance. If you do have any additional comments, anything that hasn't been stated, divergent opinions. But if not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Melanie? Okay, I saw that and then you were, Jess, Jennifer? And Anita, thank you. All right, our next application up for review is Marco Antonio Santos. Melanie and Jennifer are our primary and secondary. And Melanie, whenever you are ready to begin.
All righty. Now we are at Marco Antonio. Let's see here, just opening this up.
Sure, and I'll restart the timer once you start giving your comments so the application gets the full 10-minute allocation.
Okay. Marco Antonio is proposing a concert series, a recording project, and classes in music instruction and master classes that would be available to be accessed by lower income students. His key constituents are comprised of the immigrant communities, particularly from Latin America, underfunded and marginalized musicians and artists in Austin that are in those groups. The history of service has a strong background in collaboration with and serving the community of musicians who are marginalized and risk cultural erasure, bringing music programs, master classes, and clinics to underserved communities. He also employs a lot of members of these groups in the actual performances themselves. Cultural leadership. The cultural leadership, he is one of the main primary decision makers, being an immigrant from Brazil. The people he collaborates with on making decisions include local musicians, educators, and artists from various backgrounds. I would like to see more on the cultural leadership to reflect the key constituents. That's one thing that could be a little bit stronger as far as like the advisory and cultural leadership goes. The cultural activities, what do we got here? I would suggest clarifying a bit more on the musicians being hired, which schools and communities are holding the clinics, how they represent the key constituents. I did, however, find some of that in the marketing. So I didn't really deduct for that, but the history is coming through more in the marketing and the groups that they're reaching out to than under the cultural activities section. I saw a lot of group intersectionality between immigration, artists from women and non-binary artists, as well as immigrant artists. Accessibility. The applicant plans to offer online streaming options with closed captioning for all the events and plans to partner with organizations that specialize in accessibility services. Unfortunately, the venue being ADA compliant can't count, but the other things can. Language accessibility. He plans to provide translation into multiple languages and hire professionals to provide language accessibility services. The marketing covers all the bases, as well as the budget. So my main, I really like this project. My main feedback would be continuing to show how these projects are going to reach the key constituents and underserved communities that that they're intended for. Just a little bit more clarification on how that would be. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Secondary, Jennifer?
I thought there was a lot of information tossed out, but not necessarily connected with, strategically connected. Positive note, though, I was really impressed with the potential here because the applicant has a history of serving youth in the community, and so to me, there's a natural bridge there. But I don't know that I really could grasp the plan. The marketing section is sort of one example where it lists a number of activities, the multi-platform approach, targeting audiences within the key constituencies. That sort of confirms that, yes, they will, but without the plan stated. And then also in the marketing section is supplemental material, and I wasn't quite sure how it was related. It talks about some past use of successful use of Facebook, but that's not in relation to programming for the key constituencies. And then it refers to programming for different genres in youth. So I felt at times kind of like saturated with information and details without that speak to accomplishments, achievements, and potential, but not how things will play out and what the specific intended impact is.
Thank you for that, both of you. Any further thoughts about anyone had a different perspective on this, or if there are things that you are seeing as strengths or things that you felt like fell short that you haven't heard brought up in the conversation so far? I heard it sounded like maybe some differences between the primary and secondary about how this proposal relates to key constituencies. I'm particularly interested to hear from reviewers if you have thoughts about that, how you felt like this application relates to key constituencies.
I concurred with the secondary's opinion and review. And she really kind of just took the words out of my mouth, honestly.
Thank you. And again, folks aren't required to come to consensus. There's reviewers review each application on their own, on its merits as they see it, but it's just helpful for us to share thoughts in this section of the review process so that reviewers can reflect on what other folks have seen that they might not have seen. Anita, did you have anything to add?
Sure. I thought that this person had a high cultural competency of Austin, and I believe that the diversity of his background would definitely bode well for the community, and as he does build out this program. But I agree as well. It just needs to be a little bit more clearly defined. But I truly believe this person has great abilities and will put on a stellar event.
Thank you all. Jesus, how much time do we have left on this application? 1 minute. All right. So if anyone has anything else, I want to make sure.
If there are no further comments, I will say for the applicant watching now or watching a recording, there was a comment made earlier about finding the information in a separate section. And so we do advise the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship. So that was more a comment. We also have them provide constructive criticism or feedback for future improvement. So so the application should have been scored because the information was found. The comment was just that it wasn't necessarily in the place that they expected to find it. We have 15 seconds left. Any last comments or thoughts on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Melanie, Jennifer, Jess, and Anita. Thank you, everyone. And we have one more application to go. We are scheduled for a break, but we can go ahead and go through the next application if you'd like, or we can take a break. I leave it up to you, panel. You want to continue through the application?
I'd like to continue because it's the last application, correct?
Yes, last one. Okay, just want to make sure, we are looking at the screen for a long time, so I want to, make sure we have that. So we will do our final application for review today, LNS Crew Productions. Let me pull up the application here. Jennifer and Anita are our primary and secondary. So Jennifer, whenever you are ready to begin.
Thank you, Jesus. The applicant who submitted this proposal on behalf of LNS Crew Productions is a Black man from born and raised in Austin, Texas. He explains having grown up in the public housing projects and in Goodrich cities such as Goodrich Place, areas such as Goodrich Place in the 78704 and Booker T. Washington terraces as well, giving us reviewers an idea of how he is rooted in the community and as a member of a key constituency. Goes on to explain, I strive to represent where I'm from, both the south side and east side of the city, as well as the culture that I and my family came from. And in terms of a creative mission, my goal is to inspire people from here and give them the feeling that they too can achieve their dreams. I do so through my music, lyrics, melodies, and through my fashion and creative design as well. The service history was also very reflective of lived experience. The applicant has, again, reiterates the close tie with the community and does a really good job of talking about the specific artists, particularly musicians, who just in association with the applicant's expertise and mentorship have either as direct recipients or associates, how they have there's a correlation, I think, suggested between this relationship and their future success. So the opportunity creation is demonstrated that way. And those are referred to here as being part of Black, Latino, LGBTQIA or Asian communities. The leadership portion identifies the applicant as the sole decision maker. Think from this response, I might have wanted more information about representation. Maybe I guess it does. The response does mention the collaborators, but I don't know that it was clear to me how the leadership collaborators what their lived experiences are in terms of the communities served. I am, however, able to make some connections from responses around this one and from the supporting materials with this application. And I want to go over to my comments about the proposed activity. Well, let's see, actually, proposed activity. So they're finishing up, the project is, I think it's named earlier, I think it's a launch party. Okay, the crew album. And then there are activities around this this album that are proposed for funding. And I'm gonna look at my comments. So it clearly describes the proposed public activity. The main elements of the public activity are included. The key constituents and the proposed roles are generally named, and the Equity Center proposed outcome is asserted as a strategy that aims to bring hip hop into the fore. So here we see a musical genre that is focused on throughout this application as a platform that raises some questions of intersectionality and underrepresentation. Details about how the applicant plans to measure impact would strengthen this response. Overall, I thought that the application was consistent in the message of I come from this community and I work with the I mentor and I work with the with other artists from this community, and through those relationships, I have been really happy to see them go on and succeed. I do think that what didn't serve the application were the language accessibility and disability accessibility responses. I think really were missed opportunities, particularly in the given that there is so much effort and intent put into these mentoring relationships. So I really would have think it would have probably taken the score to the next level if those had been tended to. I think the budget was Okay. Only list payments to artists and marketing expenses. So we don't get an unpacking of production, and then there is yeah, I think more specificity as well in those details would have been helpful. So it almost like at the very end of the application, the last questions kind of took it out of the what potentially would have been a higher score.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
Sure. So this applicant was very expressive about his history and the artistry of what he does and how he's connected to the community and the partnerships that he has had or that he has with other organizations, artists and so forth. So that was, you know, that was really good to see that he's definitely ingrained into the culture of this Austin community. What I found a little bit harder to grasp was, in looking at the questions and answers, I didn't really, I couldn't find the answers to the questions, at least. So I had a hard time finding the answers to the questions because the information was so convoluted and at times it was repetitive from, some of the other answers. So I would like to have been a little bit more streamlined, answering the questions a little bit more so that we could understand exactly what activities he's planning. Let's see what else. There was a lot of information, I thought, but some of it was, like I said, not relative to the questions. So that would have been more helpful for me. But overall, I think that, what he's trying to do is amazing, and I definitely wish him luck.
Final comments in the minute that we have left from the panelists who haven't gone yet?
I concur with the primary and the secondary. My notes mimic what they were saying, but essentially I just felt like the mission was laid out there, but the details of the plan are really what was missing in the application so that I could feel confident in what they were trying to deliver.
Raised fist means 30 seconds. So Melanie, any final comments you have that haven't been covered by the other panelists, or in the 18 seconds we have left, other thoughts, panelists? If you don't have any additional thoughts, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Melanie, Jess, Jennifer, and Anita. But thank you, everyone. That concludes the review panel for today. We will stop the recording.